I'm Tatum Skipper, and welcome to Real Florida Magazine.
Welcome back. Still here with Sunland, talking about the upcoming Sunland Fall Festival. Now with Clint Cox. Clint, you came over here with Jenny Dean and with James Godwin, and we're talking about the festival. In the pre-show, we talked a little bit about your personal involvement, and that's the interesting story for me right now. You mentioned that your dad was the superintendent there. Talk about your history with Sunland.
Well, Sunland opened in 1963. It is an old Air Force base, Graham Air Force Base, that was built in Marianna back in the 30s and 40s. That eventually closed down in the late 50s. And so in 1963, the Florida legislature opened up, as they were doing around the state, a facility for individuals with what they called back then mental retardation. That's not the word we use these days, but so Sunland was one of those facilities that they opened up, and they opened it at the old Graham Air Force Base in 1963. In 1965, my father went to work there. He'd been a high school basketball coach at Marianna, got into the state system there, eventually became superintendent. So my family moved there in 1965. I was 5 years old. So eventually we moved off center, and years later, I never had planned it, but I went to work there. And so sometimes I like to say I'm one of Sunland's better alumni that came back and actually work there now.
Yeah, that's such a cool story. Well, then you understand Sunland. I mean, if anybody does in this day and time, you certainly have seen it morph, to change. You mentioned our changes in terminology. We look now at people with disabilities as having challenges, but certainly we've proved time and again that there are things that anybody can do, and you just have to find that right fit.
Yeah, it's definitely evolved over the years. In the 60s, it held as many as 1,000 clients, and they had about 300 employees. That's almost reversed now. You have about 300 clients, you have about 700 employees there. So it is definitely evolved into what used to be at Sunland. Many of those people live in the community now. There's a big push to have as many as possible live in the community. However, that's not for everybody. There are some families that, for a variety of reasons, choose to have their loved ones come and live at Sunland, at a place like Sunland. There's only 2 left in the state of Florida now, one in Marianna, one in Gainesville. So it certainly has its role for certain individuals. It's not for everybody, but the individuals that come to live there typically have some behavioral challenges, and that's what we try to specialize in helping them learn to deal with that. And the eventual goal is to try to place them back in the community. That works sometimes it doesn't, but Sunland has definitely evolved over the years.
Yeah, much like the old nursing homes, at one time, people with those types of disabilities were simply put away to separate them from the rest of society. And when you look back now, how backward we were, medieval almost, understanding our level of being able to deal with certain issues, but how far we've come.
The odd thing about that is what they felt like they were doing in the late 60s, early 70s, they felt like that was in itself progressive.
Sure.
That they were doing things to try to help the individuals. Yes, there was a certain aspect of segregation that was involved, and that got into the court systems. They eventually said, you've got to be careful about how you do that, because these people do have rights. And so there was an evolution in the thinking process. But like so many things, you look back and what you thought you were doing that was a great idea at the time now seems a little antiquated, if you will. But that's just the part of the progression.
As mentioned when we were talking to James Godwin, I want to talk a little bit more about the festival. How many years has that festival existed?
This will be the 37th year.
Wow.
So it would have, if you back your math up, that's 77 or 78. Well, math was not my forte in high school, but it started in the late 70s. And as James mentioned, it started basically as a way to kind of invite the families of the individuals who live there to come in, but also to invite the community to come in, because you got to realize at this point Sunland had been open for 15, 16 years. There were still a lot of people in the community that really didn't know what Sunland was about. So it was a way to kind of integrate or marry the community and Sunland together, and it started very small, very simple, and as like many things has evolved into what it is now, which is most would say it's the largest event in Jackson County.
Yeah, absolutely, and everything's totally free. There's no admission charge.
That is correct.
All you pay is if you buy food or from the vendors once you get in there. A couple of years ago, as mentioned, we were there and saw families that had a loved one who was a resident or client at Sunland, spending that time together that day and enjoying the festival along with everybody else. What better way to try to mainstream people with challenges than to make sure that they're in that mix? What's the best part of the festival to you personally?
Well, just that, the seeing the, you kind of asked James, what's the biggest reward, and it is clearly when you see the smiles on the individual that live at Sunland. Yes, they have developmental or intellectual disabilities, whatever your preference of that term is, but gosh, when you see them smile and you see their families having a great time, for your job, that's just, yeah, it's nice to get a paycheck every 2 weeks, but if that's all you got, it wouldn't be nearly as rewarding. But on the other hand, to see the community come in, because for us that work at Sunland, it's like a family. The individuals who live there are like family to us. We're like family to them. In fact, another antiquated term, in the old days, they used to call the staff mama or daddy. And we've tried to get away from that, but that's just a symbol of how close you can get to be with those individuals. But so to see the people that I interact with in the community come into my workplace and be a part of that is another special benefit to it.
How many people, how many visitors do you think that you get to that festival each year?
Well, we would speculate somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000. Now, Royce says that, using some of that Baptist preacher calculation, that he thinks it's more than 5. But we generally say somewhere between 4,000 to 5,000.
And speaking
but there really is no way to count because, again, we don't charge to get in. We don't charge to park. There's no tickets. It's just come and enjoy. So we don't really have a way of calculating that, but so that's just kind of a ballpark figure that we think feels good.
And you mentioned Royce Reagan from Chipola College, getting ready to retire. I almost said graduate. Getting ready to retire here in December after a lot of years at Chipola. A good friend of ours and a good friend of the show. We're going to get him on here soon so that we can give him some harassment about his retirement prior to.
He certainly needs that.
Yeah.
And deserves it.
He definitely does. He gives out more than anyone that I know.
He does.
But back to the event. This year, it's Saturday, October 31st. Parking is somewhat of an issue, especially if you've never been there before and you want to make sure that you pay attention to the signage. I went by myself 2 years ago, which was my first time going, and I drove around for a while before I found out where exactly everything was. What would you suggest to that person who's coming for the first time? What would be the best thing? Is there information on a website, or how could they best prepare themselves?
Not sure about the website. We'll have to talk to Mr. Godwin about that. Probably the simplest thing to do is to come in the main gate at Sunland. We'll have staff directing traffic. They will direct you to what's near our softball field, large open area. You can park there, then you can get on with those carts, and they will take you to the festival area, and then when you're done, you can get on a cart, they'll bring you back. That's probably the simplest, least complicated things. The people who live there in that area that go every year, it's kind of like going into a football game. They kind of know those places where they can duck in and get out a little bit quicker, but if you're a first-time festival goer, that's probably the simplest way to find your way around.
If you're coming off of I-10, and I imagine an inordinate number of people will come to the festival via I-10, what's simplified thumbnail sketch, what's the easiest way to find Sunland?
Get off on I-10 at the Highway 71 exit. Head north on Highway 71. You'll go about 2 miles. You'll dead into Highway 90. Turn left on that. You'll go about 4 miles, and Highway 71 picks back up going north. Get back on that. You'll go about 5 or 6 miles, and you won't be able to miss the signs. You'll actually turn off of Highway 71 into what's called Industrial Park Road, or there's a couple different entry points, but you'll see plenty of signs, plenty of people directing traffic that will get you where you're going.
So the main gate's located on State Highway 71.
Correct.
Well, Clint, for those who we've got kind of whetted their appetite now and they want to check it out, what would they come and expect to see this year?
Well, the event that opens the festival is the parade. The parade starts at 9 a.m. and one of the many hats that I wear at Sunland is parade chairman. So that kicks it off, and I'll talk a little bit more about the parade, but that kicks everything off at 9 a.m. You mentioned in talking with James, it is a long parade. We'll have close to 75, 80 participants. However, so it takes about 35 to 40 minutes for the parade to work its way through the environmental park. Once that's done, then the entertainment will begin. He mentioned that we have 3 entertainment stages going on. There will be people from the community that will perform at a couple of the stages. We will have one stage that is strictly for individuals who live at Sunland. They perform. They sing, they dance, just a variety of things. We have the square dancers, some other dance groups. We got a guy that will put Alan Jackson, he'll give Alan Jackson a run for his money as far as singing along with some of the track music. So,
and he's a resident.
He's a resident that lives there.
Interesting.
Knows just about every song that Alan Jackson and George Strait has ever done, and it's kind of a running, not joke, but it's a running thing that we kind of like to laugh about. I'm his stage manager, or his roadie, and I help him kind of get set up and figure out his concert venues and all that kind of stuff. That's in that 5% other miscellaneous duties in my job performance. But a lot of activities by the residents on that particular stage. And then Royce and numerous groups on the main stage. And then we have another pavilion that has a little smaller stage. So lots of music going on there. The vendors will be lined throughout the area, and so they'll start serving food as soon as they get going. So anything you can imagine at a festival, you can get it to eat there. But there's also artwork, woodwork, all kinds of crafts and a variety of things like that as far as the vendor. Then the Funland that James talked about, and that's about 3 years old, 2 or 3 years old. So that's something that's fairly new, and that has been hugely popular. Not that there weren't things for the kids to do before, because we'll have wagons and little trains and that, but the Funland stuff, even for some of the big kids, they like it. And so that's been something that has really taken off. So that's kind of in a nutshell, that's what you will see, and it'll be plenty of it.
Something for everyone, no doubt about that. If you go hungry. I found that out last year. I didn't eat breakfast before. I had press credentials, and I stuck those prominently on my dashboard, knowing I could probably get a better parking spot. I actually got into the park with my vehicle, so all my camera equipment was readily accessible, and they were very gracious about that. But I missed breakfast, and it didn't take but a few minutes, and I was sampling from everywhere. The obligatory funnel cakes, several vendors have those. Lots of good food. It's just a great fall day.
If you leave there hungry, it's nobody's fault but yours. And you have kind of two types of vendors. You have the community vendors that are coming in. Some of them, are businesses that do that. Many of them are churches and that kind of stuff that use it as fundraisers for them. You also have different areas at Sunland that set up as vendors and provide and cook food or do things, and the money that's raised from that goes directly back into the accounts that we use to do things for the residents. The vendor fees that they pay, all that money goes right back to the use for the resident. The purpose of the event is not a money maker for Sunland, but it does generate some revenue, and all that goes directly back to the resident welfare trust funds.
Mostly for an awareness for what Sunland does, though.
Yes. Well, it's just a way to interact with the community and give them the opportunity to go out and, we take our residents to the Peanut Festival. I mean, that's a huge event, but even that, we're going to take 200 people. That's still 100 folks that for various reasons don't get to go to that, but they can go to the Fall Festival. So it gives them that festival going experience.
Thanks for taking the time to come over here and talk today. It sounds like you've still got lots to do. I can't imagine that you're anything but busy these days getting ready.
Well, you know, we actually start planning for this in July. So while everybody else is sweating bullets about this or that, we're planning the fall. It's kind of like doing a Christmas event in July, cutting a Christmas album in July. We're thinking, wow, we're starting to plan this again. But there is a lot of work involved. And I will mention, as far as the parade goes, it is free, doesn't cost anything. Like everything else as far as admission and parking, the parade is free. We'll again have about 70 folks that will enter it. It'll have every beauty queen that is within Northwest Florida. We'll have all the law enforcement folks to lead it with. We'll have floats from Sunland, the residents who live there. They like to get together and build floats. Some of them will be on their bicycles. We'll have high school bands and cheerleaders and old cars and motorcycle groups. And then, of course, the last entry will always be the horses. The Buffalo Soldiers will be there. So, and all you got to do is come. You don't have to pre-register. That's the other great thing about it. We do like folks to pre-register, and my number is 482-9387, or you can just call Sunland and they'll get you to me. But you can show up on the morning of the parade. Lineup starts at 8 a.m. We don't do lineup numbers per se. We have the core group in front that we've set up with our residents, our administration, and the law enforcement. And then the last group is the horses. And everything in between is you line up however you show up. And so that's what I told Royce. You know, if Royce shows up on that Saturday morning and he's got, you know, a purple suit with pink polka dots and he's got a unicycle and his camera, we'll find a place to put him in the parade.
I'd pay to see that.
The other thing that I would like to mention as far as the parade goes is we don't mind them throwing out candy. All we ask is if you are going to throw out candy, that it be individually wrapped and it be soft candy so that it's not any type of choking risk for the folks that live there.
And if you stay for the whole parade, don't eat the brown candy at the end of the parade. Clint, thanks for taking the time again.
Hey, it's been my pleasure.
We plan on being there. We'll look you up. You're probably going to be like a chicken with his head cut off, I would imagine.
Well, once the parade, actually the best moment of the day for me, you were asking James, and yeah, all the smiles and everything, the best moment of the day for me is at 9:01 because the parade has gotten started. But then after the parade's over, then we'll be helping out with some of the sound stages and doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, we'll be around. We'll be hopping.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Here right now with Clint Cox from Sunland, their big fall festival. When I say big, this is huge. You're going to have to check it out. It's Saturday, October 31st in Marianna. There's a map on the screen right now. No excuse for you not to check it out. It's totally free. It doesn't matter if you got 20 kids. Bring them all. They'll welcome you. We'll be right back.